I'm sorry, Devin, you ready?
All set.
Okay. This is the meeting of the Town School Partnership of the Town of Brookline for April 15, 2021. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes of our last meeting. Any objections or edits to the minutes? Oh, here's Mary Ellen. Hello, Mary Ellen. Okay. Okay, I move approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Okay. Let's see, we have to take a roll call. So make sure I get everyone that's on the committee. All in favor? Nancy?
Aye.
Michael?
Yeah, aye.
Let's see, Mariah?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Cliff?
Yes.
Is anyone else on the committee?
You.
And well, chair votes aye. Okay, so
go.
minutes are approved. Next, fiscal year 21-22 update. This should be interesting. How are we doing?
Sure. Well, I think our focus today is to talk about the federal funds, but we do want to take an opportunity to check in on FY21 as we sort of are nearing towards the end of that fiscal year, and also, of course, update on where we're going with FY22. And so, Melissa, can I just ask if you would provide a general update, especially around the FY22 state aid stuff that's been going on, and then also look for the schools, especially on 21, to see how we're doing with the potential deficit there.
Sure. So in terms of fiscal 21, our departmental accounts look pretty much in order. Justin's been monitoring any utility transfers that might be needed at this point. I think the only account that we're looking at is potentially Newberry College utility related transfer might be needed, but he's still working through that with Charlie. In terms of other town departmental accounts, town clerk is the only other area at this point. And then of course we have our snow removal transfer that will be coming within the next month or so. And then in terms of revenue, things look pretty much on target. I know that hotel and hotel motel still lagging a little bit behind, meeting the budget estimates for meals at this point, and then marijuana, although the host committee revenue has come in slightly lower than what we had originally projected. And I am still a little bit concerned about our motor vehicle excise numbers at this point. So that's really the fiscal 21 update. Mary Ellen, I know that earlier in the year we had been talking about a placeholder on the school side for fiscal 21. Just wondering what the update is for that.
Yes, I'll be presenting to the school committee shortly, requesting a formal reserve fund transfer of probably about $1 million. The budget deficit is hovering about 810 to 840 at this point. However, historically in June, I'm typically chasing $200,000 to $300,000 in a variety of different payroll related expenditures, and I'm hoping that those will not appear. But given that the last payroll is on July 8th and my last day is on June 30th, wanting to make sure there is a reserve fund and enough funds available for that final payroll for anything that is unforeseen. We are closing the budget May 1st, and then a hard stop on June 1st for special education grants and revolving funds, so that I can have the books closed as much as possible through at the end of June, and have all that's known be known. So that's where our 21 budget is, so that we have not moved really off of that messaging since the beginning of the year.
Okay, can I just ask a question about that? So we want to make sure that we use CARES funds to the extent totally possible. CARES funds expire in December. So are you sure you're taking into consideration all those CARES funds? I know we're going to have a little update on CARES, but we're prepared to move, all of that to a remote learning academy, which is
well, we actually identified more than the original offer that you provided. So we've identified more than that. So certainly if I can shed a little bit more over. We had like 2.6 million, 2.5 million identified as RLA related expenses. So certainly that would be a huge help rather than tapping the reserve fund. That would be, and I can work with Justin and Melissa on making those transfers if that's available.
Well,
Any
I
part of
we
that.
can't leave any money on CARES left unexpended. I
Yep.
mean, you know, we have to turn it back, and we don't want to do that. So I know we're talking about CARES in just a moment,
Yep.
but in terms of 21, Melissa, you ran through a few potential transfers, and we heard about the $1 million. That's within the range of what is available for the advisory committee.
Yes. In terms of 22, the only change from the financial plan is the GIC rates. And I believe you should have received a memo on that for the town and school allocations around group health. And then I know the Ways and Means budget has just come out. We haven't received the cherry sheet on that yet, but we are not anticipating that we will be the beneficiary of the additional money that they're putting towards Chapter 70. It's for Student Opportunity Act, and I don't know if your channels have provided any insight on what that might mean for you guys. But at this point, we're thinking that things are probably going to remain the same.
We have Tommy Toro sent an update of where he's expecting we'll get as a minimum. Have you seen that?
So I think he gave a statewide update. So how that translates to Brookline, I didn't get any Brookline specific numbers.
I think I've got something from him that says that. Hang on, let me see if I can find it.
I thought that Tommy had said that that Brookline Funding would be essentially level funded from the current fiscal year. Whereas in the long range plan that I think was posted online, you have it dropping by 15%. So
Yeah,
you have it
did.
dropping
We
from
did,
22
but,
to 18 million, but he's saying that it should be level funded from at 22.
well, 22, I don't know, what's 22?
The current fiscal
20
year
million?
state money is 22 million. And if
Oh,
you
22
have
million.
for FY20, I know it's confusing, but for FY22, you have it reduced to 18 million and change. It's reduced by, I think 15% was what the long range plan had said.
Right, we took the governor's numbers when we put out the financial plan.
Yeah,
so
we
that's
had
where we are right now.
adopted, we're no longer at 15% reduction. We used the governor's proposal, and my recollection is that even this House Ways and Means is pretty much the governor's numbers as it relates to Brookline. So whatever, when we put the budget together in February 15th, we're not projecting any change in state aid from that. Is that right, Melissa?
Right.
So is the long range plan that's posted in OpenGov out of date?
So we always, the forecast changes when we present it the following year. So that is kind of the preliminary numbers before the financial plan comes out. And then the financial plan becomes the current budget status. So I think the forecast would remain until we update it the following year.
So what is the current revenue? Are we going to have a presentation today of what the current revenue projections are then?
So that was presented when we put the financial plan out in mid-February.
Yeah, we've
but
done
I can
several
provide you
times.
with that as well.
So so are we going to talk about the ARP money though, as part of sort of a change in revenue projections for counting
Well,
that as a revenue?
ARP. Yep, we're going to talk about the ARP pretty soon. Yep.
Just to be clear, is the budget book what you're talking about in terms of quote unquote mid-February?
Right. So the only change from when the financial plan was released, the budget book, is the GIC numbers. That's the only change.
Yeah. Got it.
Okay, any
Can I ask
further?
a dumb question? Is the budget book what's in OpenGov?
So we have a couple of links on in Budget Central related to the budget. So we put out the preliminary CIP first, the forecast, and then we put out the financial plan. And so the financial plan is the budget book. And so that all of those links are on the website.
The
And
budget
don't-
book supplants any prior estimates or projections.
So when I go to the Budget Central and click on long range plan,
That's
Or
the
the-
presentation that was done in December. And Mariah, I'm happy to help you navigate offline. You know, we can.
can you just drop the link in the chat? Is
Sure.
that possible? Thank
Yeah,
you.
absolutely.
So can, anything more on 21 or 22? Anybody wants to talk about? Obviously, 22 still is a work in progress. But anything else before we move on? We're going to move on to CARES and then the ARP.
Okay, seeing nothing else on people's minds, why don't we move on to CARES?
All right. So CARES is the current federal money that we've had and we're spending. And that's going to expire in a few months. And so we believe we're going to be in a position of spending it all on the COVID-related expenses. So Justin, would you mind just giving us a final update on that, or a latest
Yes.
update on?
Yep. I'm going to share my screen real quick. So as everyone's aware, the town got an allocation of $5.2 million in CARES. We've received about $2.3 million from 2 rounds of submissions. So we have round 1 and round 2. And as everyone's aware, they extended the initial deadline from December 30th of 2020 to December 30th, 2021. So we have a final, I hope is final, round 3 submission that we will be going for soon. And I'll just quickly run down what some of those expenses are as part of the round 3 submission. We have the $1.1 million that we've allocated for the school's remote learning. I want to thank Mary Ellen and Jim and the school's team for helping us to allocate those expenses. We have about $681,000 in unemployment expenses that are above and beyond what our typical unemployment expenses are due to COVID. We have about $550,000 for the COVID testing programs that we agreed to in December, about $300,000 for schools and $250,000 for the town side. We have the $300,000 for the food pantry allocation, approximately $200,000 for personnel and OT costs, fire OT, some of the concierge position and emergency management position. And then we have $50,000 for the Zoom license renewal for another year. And then about $16,000 or so in miscellaneous tech items associated with COVID, sort of like calendaring and subscriptions that we've purchased for the library and different town departments. So that will utilize the full allocation of the $5.2 million. And once we get all those costs allocated to the various line items we have, we will go for that submission and get the remaining amount of funding that is provided to the town. So there's a brief update.
Thank you, Justin. Any questions about CARES? Jim, are you continuing your pool testing program, and how's that going?
You're muted, Jim.
Sorry. Yes, we are continuing the pool testing, and the commissioner announced yesterday that they're going to continue funding through the summer.
Excellent. So that actually is a program that we're getting some state contributions as well from the state testing program as well, and the CARES money matches or makes up the difference. So
Yeah.
Good. The town's testing program site has closed, and surprisingly, they haven't received a lot of fallout from it. I just think there's so much testing capacity available as opposed to vaccine. But okay, so any further question on CARES? So then I think we will move right into the major presentation, which is about the ARP and other federal funding. So some of you may have seen a little bit of this at the select board meeting the other night, where select board asked for an update on this. And it's essentially the same presentation, it's a little expanded. So Melissa, do you have that up that you can help me with? So the title of this is the American Rescue Plan, but I want to be clear that there are multiple federal resources available in addition to the rescue plan. And these are the way I'm looking at it. Number one is the one we're all hearing about. It's the direct state and local aid. But there are hundreds of billions of dollars available also that have been authorized for the federal or state government to use these funds for competitive grant programs. And there are going to be multiple competitive grant programs using federal aid. And I sure hope the town will be poised to take advantage of those. We have the federal infrastructure bill that has not been enacted yet, but it sounds to me like one way or the other, there's going to be an infrastructure bill coming out of Congress, perhaps not as ambitious as the Biden proposal, but nonetheless, I think will provide a lot of opportunities for the town and the state to use for kind of shovel-ready type projects. And then finally, Congress is reinstating the earmarks process. It has been gone for many years, I think, and I think with an effort to try to initiate some bipartisanship in budget making and other congressional activities, they're allowing each congressman to submit proposed earmarks into the major bills, and we're definitely going to take advantage of that. So the point I'm just saying is, even though the big story is the American Rescue Plan, the direct aid we're getting, there are these other areas that what we're hearing is the town really needs to be strategic and make sure that we're submitting programs and requests for funding in all of these, and making sure that we're not double counting or trying to we want to get the best bang for the buck, I guess is what I'm saying. But mostly we're going to talk about number one today. So let's go to the next slide.
My slides weren't advancing, so hold on a minute.
Do you want me to try to put it up, Melissa? Are you having a hard time with?
No, I
controlling that?
I can do it. It was just getting stuck.
Okay, so here's the direct state and local aid. Nationwide, it's $360 billion, or about 19% of the total funding in ARP is going to this direct funding to states and cities and towns. These are the four categories that are in the legislation. We can all debate about what they mean. And we've been doing that, and we've been getting information from some of our partners who are out there. But I will tell you that we have not received one word informally from any federal or state agency. And I just read today that the U.S. Treasury Department is creating its own new unit to create regulations and to be responsible for the administration of this program. But the four categories are to respond to the public health emergency or its negative economic impact. I think we all can assume that that's a very broad area, and I think it is. We don't know exactly what regulations will be managed, but we're expecting that one is going to be extremely flexible and encompass a lot of possible opportunities. The next one is probably the least well-known. It's to respond to workers performing essential work during the COVID-19 public health emergency. I'm not really sure what that means. A lot of unions are trying to interpret what that means, but until the Treasury Department decides what that means, I am not going to speculate. Number three is the provision of government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue due to the COVID-19 public health emergency. That is what we consider to be the ability to use this to get the town back up and running and to replace some of the revenue lost as a result of COVID, or because we haven't been able to do certain things as a result of the COVID, the economics of the COVID emergency. This one I think is also very broad. I would just say that the concerns we have with this category is that if we use this one-time money, because as you know, this money will be gone by 24, we have to have a plan how we're going to replace it in order to continue to provide the kind of services and expenditures that we've used these monies for. So that's one caution. And then finally, to make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. And so when we're on our webinars and somebody says, can we use it to build a bridge? They say, does it say bridge in there? It doesn't. And so we don't know. We think it's probably, we should assume it's only water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. We hope that broadband infrastructure will be wide enough to consider cybersecurity issues, which are our major issues. Although I think you all know that we have gaps in broadband in our community. And so this is an interesting opportunity for us. But these are the 4 categories that are in the act. And we chose to just write them down because we do not have any information about how these will be interpreted. And again, when we are on these webinars, and we've been on a lot of them, people throughout the country are asking, well, what about this? And what about that? And almost by, we should just have a recording. We have to wait until the Treasury Department regulations are promulgated. And those that won't happen for about another month. So with that, this is the number. We're going to get $34.2 million. I think I mentioned before, because we're considered a metro city, meaning 50,000 or more population, and we're a CDBG entitlement community. Go back to the slide. We get a favorable allocation formula. And so that metro cities reflects that formula. That was the one where you might remember Chelsea and some other Methuen and some other communities that are really hard hit by pandemic are not metro cities and really complained, used Brookline and Newton as the examples of why it was so unfair. And the governor has already indicated that he's going to use some of his money somewhere to fill the gap there. But that was a decision by Congress, and we benefit by that allocation formula. Per capita county share, counties in the United States are getting this money directly from the federal government. In Massachusetts, as you all know, there are some counties that are only in name only, and the state's going to take that money and then allocate it by per capita. But those counties that are still in operation, including our county of Norfolk, will get this money and they can decide how to spend it. Our per capita share is 11.5 million, and we've encouraged the county to distribute all of it by per capita, but I don't think they will. I think they're going to use some of the money to do their own governmental projects, and the remaining amount will be distributed per capita, but 11.5 is the maximum we could get out of that allocation. I don't know when we're going to know what they're going to do. And then we think our local education agency will get 3.7 million of a separate ESSR fund for a total maximum allocation of 49.4 million. Now that money, okay, next slide, that money will be distributed in two, what they refer to as tranches. The first one is 60 days after enactment, which we believe will be around May 11th. And then the second one will be a year later. And all of them have to be spent, all the monies have to be spent for December 31st, 2024. So really what we're talking about is really 3 years or 2.5 years worth of our budget year that these funds will be available. Now, I'm not suggesting we just throw them in the budget. In fact, I'm suggesting we don't do that, but we have a lot of needs that are one-time in nature or ways we can spend this money. And I think we need to be really strategic about it. I do think we need to really figure out how to engage the public about it. That's it. The only thing, the second bullet point I want to mention, so we don't have any regulations, but we do have 2 exclusions that are built right into the legislation. And it says that you cannot use the money to offset tax cuts or delay a tax. So for example, if we had an override plan for July 1st and it got approved, we couldn't defer that and use the federal money to offset that. And also, which we don't have, and then we also cannot be deposited into a pension fund. I'm not sure if our pension funding plan qualifies there. We have to find out more, but that's that. And then I will tell you that I'm a little worried, in addition to the Treasury Department regulations, I'm a little worried about what the Department of Revenue and the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education could do to us. They always seem to find a way to make life a little more complicated for us with the regulations. So we have to be worried about that. These are the guidance to date. And as I said, it's not formal guidance. We got no guidance whatsoever from the federal government, although, there have been federal officials on these webinars, but they're just speaking really for themselves. What they're saying is use the direct aid for gaps and priorities that are not eligible for other federal state assistance programs. I think that's the getting our best bang for the buck concept. Stabilize your operations and support those most impacted by COVID-19. I think that's, we believe that too. Create a well-defined plan with equity at its core and prioritize fiscal stability and returning to work. And that's not just for town government, that's our community as well, because this is an economic stimulus package. There are some other sections that relate to some of the stuff I was talking about. These are other sections of the American Recovery Act, and we're going to get really familiar with those as we go forward. Next steps. This is from the Select Board's presentation of the night. We're presenting now the Town School Partnership. We really want to quantify COVID-19 revenue loss and what the impacts from COVID are. That doesn't mean we have to spend it all for those, but we at least want to quantify what we consider our COVID-19 direct impacts. We really want to identify capital projects and priorities, especially those that are shovel ready or to try to get into shovel ready conditions. Wait and evaluate the federal and state regs. Create a comprehensive and well-defined plan with equity at its core. We mentioned that before, and I think that's where some of the strategy is involved, and then creating a transparent process with appropriate public input. We are using the town's OpenGov platform to serve as the official clearinghouse of information, but I'm guessing that we really want to use this process to do some of the things that BFAC and others have talked about in terms of engaging our public and maybe even having a public sort of budgeting exercise with some of the funds. That's it. That's all I got.
Okay, any questions? Nancy. You're muted, Nancy.
I'm wondering whether you had any idea of water infrastructure projects that we need that could qualify here.
Yeah, definitely. Our DPW is on notice, and it's interesting. At least in this part of the country, the MWRA really is very aggressive in providing grants and loans to us, and we've used those very routinely. So, but I'm guessing that there are programs that are available for that funds. I think we're focusing especially on broadband and what that means for Brookline.
Hey, are there any residual needs that we found from the lead in the water program the state had a couple of years ago?
I don't know, Bernard.
Okay.
Not sure. I'll find out.
The other thing that I find intriguing is this earmarks, and how do we identify things that we could get our representative or our senators to give us earmarks for?
Yeah, so that's gonna take. I think most of the appropriations bills originate in the House. So I think Representative Auchincloss is somebody, a department, an agency, an office, I should say, we need to get very familiar with. And we did. Recently, we got a, hurry up, give us some earmark projects. And so when that happens, that occasionally happens either at the state level or most recently at the state level, we just go to our CIP because, we don't have the ability to create projects. In fact, they're looking for projects that have already been developed to some level. So we just pick them right out of our CIP. I don't know what's going to happen this time around. I think this is an experiment, how Congress is going to try to do this. But every congressperson, I think, has been given the ability to submit 10 projects. Is that your understanding, Melissa?
That's the general guidance for this past round of earmarks.
So you can imagine Congressman Auchincloss's district is very wide. So, to get 10 projects out of the whole district, we'll be lucky if we can get one.
Yeah.
But
I'm thinking that, given the size of his district and the, greater needs, particularly in the southern part of the district, we may want to think about, a project at the Housing Authority that we can't spend money on, but that may lend itself to an earmark. That would appeal to him because it's not, rich northern district communities looking for more money, but it's Brookline looking for the type of equity related aid that or help that similar to what's going on in the South. Nancy.
A follow-up question to the previous one. We talked about broadband, but I'm wondering whether that could apply to help us boost BIG, which wants to do that. I know on a long-term basis, but at least short-term, is there any possibility, or you just don't know yet?
don't know, but sounds like a possibility.
I think that Jim had his hand up first, and then Mike.
Mel, in the previous slide, there was something that said Education Stabilization Fund. Is that additional funds? Is that?
I'm not sure, Melissa. You were able to. Could you pull that slide up again and address that, please?
Sure.
Where you got that information and how it relates to information we already have.
So that's an outside section of the act. So I would probably look into getting, this probably came from either the GFOA or the OpenGov site. We're building off a template that they had given us. So that reference is likely in there as well. But I will hunt it down and send it to Mary Ellen, the source of that.
Thank you.
Michael.
Yeah, so in terms of looking for significant need and for the use of one-time funds, very clearly in the minds of some of us who've come to this meeting, the school deferred maintenance issues come up, and one of the things, of course, that is that the advisory committee just passed a resolution asking for a work group to work on that specifically, and we don't expect that all of that can be dealt with in a single year, but we're looking for a program or a mechanism, actually, and that's separately from the CARES Act, but just as from the ARP. But the ARP funds nonetheless sound like they could be used for that using the infrastructure framework. Does that make sense from your perspective?
It's not unreasonable.
All right.
Thank you. So the next steps on your slide, Mel said, next step is to quantify, after today's meeting, is to start to quantify the revenue loss, which to me is sort of my questions earlier was looking at that those long range projections. And for example, the local receipts, we talked a little bit about state revenue, but the local receipts are also down. Off the top of my head, they were around 36 million, and then they've dropped based on last year's number of 24 million, and they've more or less, then they only gradually increase sort of like a small amount. They never, at least in the long range projections, they don't necessarily return back up to where they were at all. They stay pretty close to 24 up to 27-ish. And so I guess my question is, when we're thinking about over the next 2.5 years, really getting a bead on what actually, like, are we expecting that COVID is going to destroy restaurants and pot and parking meters, you know, sort of permanently to the extent that they have now? If not, what is that return to normal that we're thinking about for local receipts? And how do we at least think about the portion of the ARP funds that are intended for revenue replacement, and think about, as we patch over the next 2 years or 2.5 years with that revenue replacement in mind? It seems to me, and Melissa, I have no idea, you're the expert in this, right? That it seems to me that the greatest sort of gap and damage was to the local receipts, though. And then how does this ARP money plug the immediate dive we saw, but we would expect somewhat of a return to normal over the next 2 years? And then how do we, whatever that total is, if it's, you know, we're thinking we lost $10 million a year for the next 2 years, and then whatever the balances of this money allocate for one-time projects. But I'm hoping that at the end of the 2.5 years, we're going to end up with revenues that have returned to normal, quote unquote. And so in the meantime, though, we'll be able to have some sort of stability on our expenses side. Rather than just thinking about this money for big one-time projects, there is this revenue replacement. So can you talk a little bit about the time, like, are you thinking about this in the same way I'm thinking about it in terms of that revenue replacement? And if so, or how are you thinking about it? And then what is your time frame for that next step in terms of when we would have like a adjusted revenue model that incorporates ARP over the next 2.5 years?
Let me try, Melissa, and then I can ask you for the.
Sorry for the like 500-part question.
I would say the answer is, yeah, of course, we've been thinking about using the funds for some revenue replacement. I think we're very concerned that, you know, we don't be too aggressive, and so that at the end of that 2 or 3 year period, we really have a hole. But yes, I think that is our expectation, is that some of the funds could be reasonably and reliably used to provide this temporary bridge to normal. And you know, that when we talk about that's the next step, I think we want to start crunching the numbers and really understand what that really means. I would say I would be very reluctant to make any recommendations until I saw Treasury Department regulations. You know, it just seems to me not to make a lot of sense to make plans without that. I've been burned too many times. You know, it's not just the money, it's what the money can be used for. And for example, are they going to say you can only use a percentage for this category or not another one? And so that's a little concern. And frankly, the timing of that is not great, because we start our town meeting on a week later.
Yeah, that was my next question, right? Was, so how do we proceed? Right now, you know, the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funds are essentially serving as revenue replacement for us, but that's, I think, partially not the spirit of them, although and partially, and really whereas this funds is, I feel like we should be flip-flopping what's going on here, and so I'm trying to get a better sense. But if you don't think that the Treasury regulations are going to be promulgated until mid-May, then how does this work in terms of timing and everything else?
The interesting thing, I think, is we're not sure yet, and this is where the state might come in. But as far as we know, we're going to get these monies directly from the U.S. Treasury, going to go right into our Treasury. Gina's getting very excited about this. She can start investing some money. To my knowledge, they don't have to be appropriated by town meeting. I could be wrong, but right now, so I don't, you know, I say May is coming up in the town meeting, but, you know, we could do it in July or, you know, August, September, or whenever. I think we got to learn what the rules are. But at this
If I-
point, our plan is to go forward with our budget at this point. And we're not sure to what extent, we would change that. I think the federal dollars will be used on top of that.
I could just add a little bit about revenue as well, is that, we do conservative budgeting on purpose because the excess funds in our revenue estimates they essentially feed the capital plan. So, we're looking, the capital plan took a hit in 22 as well, because we didn't have as much free cash as we're used to getting, that would fund a lot of projects. So I would also just be hesitant to fund anything recurring without being absolutely certain that that receipt is coming back. As an example, for marijuana, back in 2019, which is the year that we're supposed to use as the comparative, we were the only game in town and we were booming. But we know that 2 years from then, there are other pot shops that are open that are also, in the mix in terms of revenue. So I don't think that we're going to see the same level of local receipt, once we're fully recovered, that we were experienced for that particular item in 19.
You won't get federal reimbursement for revenue replacement for lost marijuana.
It's a good point too, Mike.
Well, but you're also going back to like 10 years ago or 7 years ago for your receipts number. I mean, it's going back to FY14, FY15.
Treasury, we already know 2019 is the year that we can use for comparison. That's been out there in a couple of different places, but I don't know what about the longer term history, whether or not we'll be able to use that.
Okay, Cliff?
Yeah, so let me just pick up on, I think one of the issues that Mariah is concerned about, because I share the concern, which is how does the town effectively project where we think we're going to get to. And because if we use any of this money for some operating stopgap purposes, we have to be planning for how we're going to, where that arc is going to cross, right? And if we take a position or a perspective that we're only going to plan for increases in certain revenue sources based upon what happened the prior year, okay, then we really can't plan. We're always going to be reactive. And so to me, it comes back around to, is there any way as we move forward, once we understand what we're able to use monies for, once, we start down a path where we can start doing some scenario analysis, some what ifs, because otherwise we really are just, reactive. I think that's not a good place for us to be.
I think that's a great point, Cliff. And, frankly, we could use some help. I think, we'd like to engage with AC and others. There's a lot of number crunching here, a lot of assumptions to make. And, I think that is the next step for us. We really want to be in a position when we know what the regulations are to move forward with a plan. I would just also say that you all know there's a proposal going before the advisory, the town meeting, seeking to create a process around emergency funds generally, because emergency funds often aren't appropriated by town meeting. And so, I think we've got to be very careful. And I think this is primarily the select board's responsibility to decide, how to engage the public, especially if there's not a public town meeting appropriation process, and make sure that we're listening to our residents too. So it's not just us sitting around. I think carving this money up.
Okay. Hey, let me ask a question. Mel, you said that you expect money to come in from the U.S. Treasury to our general fund that Gina will be able to invest. Is this not a money on a reimbursement, sent to us on a reimbursement basis?
Nope.
Okay. Do we know if we can invest?
Gina, you there to talk a little bit about that? What you're hearing about what concerns or regulations you might have to invest these funds?
The recent information that I received is that I can invest it just as I do all of the other general fund monies. I can't go and invest like we do for retirement. I still am held accountable to the investment listing by the state and just treasuries. So pretty minimal, keeping it just as I do the general fund.
So no yield restrictions or anything?
Not that I've heard thus far. In fact, I've heard everybody should be trying to earn interest. That's what other financial
Okay.
institutions are saying.
Wow, cool. Mike,
Sorry. Mel, you said one thing and then I heard an echo of it in a sense, that you weren't sure that it was necessary to have town meetings action to allocate these funds. And that's I'll just, I don't want to, that kind of blows my mind a little bit. But let's say that's the case, then we do need to make sure that there is a very open process in terms of setting the priorities for these funds, because we don't want people to feel like, oh, well, a little group of folks in a smoke-filled Zoom room ran off with the money. So it seems to me like one of the things Cliff's comment about, well, we should be thinking about what we would do if the regulations say this and what we would do if they say that. Yes, that's true. But I think we ought to start thinking about designing a public process so that we let people know what the thinking is.
So Mike, that's actually not what I was saying, but and I want to get back to the question about the article that Mel referenced, which I think BAC is going to be hearing about tonight, which is an article that talks about reporting on what is being done with the funds. There's a kind of an implicit acknowledgement in that proposal that these funds are outside of the normal process, much like it is you're spending your snow money, right? You've got emergency funds. There are things you can use them for. You're supposed to be doing them because you're dealing with an emergency. There is a provision in there that has a public hearing at some point after funds actually are received and are being expended. So there's at least an opportunity for people to weigh in, as you're suggesting. But I think to develop a budget process like we have at town meeting, you're going to you're time limited as to what you can do with these monies, and some of this stuff needs to get done fairly fast to make sure you don't lose it.
Yeah, I think, we were envisioning that we would be using kind of the select board meetings for updates and, part of I think there's no way that we can't be transparent about this because there's so much interest in these funds that we're going to have to air all of the information as much as we know on a regular basis. And I see the select board meetings being that mechanism.
Mariah, you had your hand up.
Thank you. So in the middle of this, though, I guess I just want to sort of restate that that using it as revenue replacement, though, in many ways is a much cleaner sort of first step to, or figuring out which percentage of it should be, or which portion should be revenue replacement, because that is already something that people understand, right? And we have talked about those. Those would be services that people know of, and we would be essentially having to cut some things. And so I think it's really important to make sure that people that hopefully, as you're thinking about the priorities in that process, that revenue replacement really does come up as the first thing, and then whatever is left, then there's this public process around deciding these one-time priorities. But otherwise, the question is, are we cutting services essentially? And so at least that's how I see it. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but but a significant revenue reduction will mean a cut in services. And to
Well,
fund the one-time projects for a temporary cut in services doesn't seem like it's.
Well, I think I agree with you, and I've said I think revenue replacement is a component, but there's a lot of people who want a lot of money for a lot of different things, and and there are things we don't do currently. So I guess we're going to hear a lot about that, whether it's about kitchens at the housing authority or what have you. We've all heard the proposals.
I don't think it's either or, though. I think there's going to be space for both. I'm assuming there's going to be space for both. And I just think that it's important, though, that we don't just talk about it as it's choosing among all the one-time things and shorting some of our service obligations, which are ongoing.
I think it's an opportunity for innovation as well, though, to also look at those services and figure out if there's a way to do it differently. So you could use this money as investment in order to kind of change the model of how you're providing the service.
Mm-hmm.
Nancy?
I just want to agree with Cliff on the emergency nature of some of these funds. I mean, if the Davis footpath bridge is falling down, then we have to act. We can't wait. And it's fine to have a process afterwards, and we certainly need a process planning going forward. But when we start talking about you making processes for emergency funds, I get a little nervous that I love Brookline, but those processes take a long time sometimes. So we have to just be really mindful of that.
And even replacing the Davis footbridge wasn't universally agreed to. So
that was, I believe, was that one of the projects we put in for earmarks?
No, it was the bridle path. Yeah, I think it might have been Davis Path, bridle path, multimodal on and then Davis Path as well.
Yeah. But I really think that some of these projects, we're not going to have to spend from our allocation from the direct ARP. I just think we got to be on top of all these programs and be poised to get them. And that's when we really be able to expand beyond the $49 million we're getting to something much more. And all of our department heads have been really put on notice about this. They are, everybody is trying to participate in the whatever webinar or stuff is out there. But I will tell you, Melissa in particular has participated, Justin, and all of them. We're just hearing the same thing over and over again now. We just gotta wait.
How do we get started while we're waiting, thinking about what we, trying to organize our heads around priorities, including the priority that Mariah raises about, about revenue replacement?
So I would say look at the four
I
categories.
start doing some crunching some numbers and doing, as Cliff said, let's look at some scenarios and do it that way. And then, maybe on May 11th, Treasury will say, sorry, you can't do that because you only could use FY19 as your base, right, or something like that. But at least we could start that. And, I know Melissa does a lot that as part of the long range forecast. And so, we got a lot of the numbers, and I think maybe an ad hoc committee. I know the advisory committee from time to time has a revenue committee or what have you, and or it could be a subcommittee of this group. We're happy to engage in some exercise.
Okay, well, we'd be happy to put an ad hoc subcommittee together to work with you, because this is not something that any one sort of segment of the town government should be doing all by itself. So we'd be happy to help, but really what I'm asking is, how can we help? What would you like to do next?
Well, I know that Mariah can model anything now, so it's as long as she's on board, we're all set.
Okay.
So what is the next step, though? Seriously, are we going to?
Well, I think getting a smaller group of people, well, look, we're in the middle of budget season, the middle of town meeting season, so we need to be a little bit realistic about everyone's capacity to do things over the next several weeks. But getting a relatively small group of people to, to talk through some of these things, and then hopefully there are folks who are skilled enough to lend a hand to the extent that there's number crunching involved that can be distributed. I think we should just try to do that, and that could be
Might
people from the
suggest
school
that
side.
we initiate, we
Sorry.
create an offer for people who want to be involved, and we'll have a couple of working meetings, and then we report back to this group and say, here's some of the scenarios we've developed. We'll have to wait for Treasury guidance to decide how to go, but at least here's a couple different ways to approach it. Is that okay with you, Melissa?
That, I think that
Probably
would
get
work
Gina
well.
and Justin and Mary Ellen involved in that effort.
A staff working group.
Well, we
Not just staff, no, that's not fair to the staff, honestly, we have to.
Oh, yeah. And
I'm happy
maybe a
to support
representative
modeling
from each-
too, and I'm sure Cliff is, right? Since you
No,
volunteered me, I'll volunteer you.
I'm happy to do whatever I can. I just don't think I have quite the same skill level as others, but absolutely.
Okay, good. Okay, that's the next step. We'll wait for you.
I would just, one last thing I would say is when you're hearing things like, oh, I heard you can use the money for this or that, and you have an actual source of data, we're very interested in it. So we don't suggest that we know everything. We think we've heard everything, but if you hear of other things, we're definitely interested in tracking it down. But what we found so far is a lot of people have a lot of ideas, but nothing that has been tested at all.
One last thing is the resolution that the advisory committee passed, and the question is where we go with that, how that fits into this, because to some extent, if we can get one piece of the deferred maintenance paid for out of some of these funds, that's a good start. But we recognize that it's a longer term process than that. And it's therefore parallel, but it really is separate from what we're talking about right now. How do you want us to give you something more specific around how we might work this, or do you have some ideas yourselves? Where do we go from here, basically?
You asking me, Mike?
Yes, sir.
I don't have an answer. I just saw the thing.
Has everyone gotten a copy, Mike?
I'm sorry?
Has everyone gotten a copy of the resolution?
Everybody in this room has, I think, perhaps with the exception of Jim and Mary Ellen and Gina, but I think everybody sent everybody else.
When was it sent out?
Last night. But okay, I mean, it's not instantaneous. I don't expect an instantaneous definitive
Mike, why
answer.
don't you just summarize it? What is the initiative all about?
Sure. So what we'd like to do is we're looking at, broadly speaking, a very substantial, well, actually, let me read the resolution to you. That's the easiest way. Hang on a second. Let me dig this out of here. Where did it go? Sorry, it's going to take me longer to find it than is worth. So the resolution basically says what we'd like to set up. We'd like to have a work group that deals with the issues of deferred maintenance and the especially in the schools, but also on the town side, and the rising costs of utilities in comparison to the rising out-of-pocket cost for us for utilities in comparison to the actual index of cost for utilities, because we seem to be, and perhaps because of COVID-19 and the increased use of ventilation, our utilities have gone up. And generally speaking, look at the long-term, a way to solve the deferred maintenance issue in a coherent long-term way.
Okay, good.
So
Yeah, Cliff?
no, I was just going to add that Carol Levin, who was a primary author of this, is an attendee, and I don't know if she has anything to add to what Mike said.
Yeah,
but,
that wouldn't be a bad idea. Yeah.
If she does, then perhaps she can get promoted. I just asked Devin if she could do that so that Carol could make a comment or two.
Hi there. I was offering if you wanted me to put it up.
Yeah, good.
To do that.
Yeah, I'm still switching my so-called desktop.
That's not the right one though. Or I can send it to you.
Oh, I got it here. Here we
You
go.
do? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's just review it, but discuss it at a future meeting.
All right. Well, we'll
I
show you
guess
what we
needs to be
said here
more
anyway.
detailed.
So this is the heart of it. The whereas recites the situation with deferred maintenance, recites situation with utility costs, but the resolved part is obviously the important part. A working group with representatives, basically the people sitting around this table right now, to develop solutions to the recurring shortfall in the repair and maintenance budget for school buildings, the backlog of deferred repair and maintenance needs for school buildings, and increased utility costs. And recognizing that there's nothing that's going to happen for FY22, looking towards FY23 for implementation. I have a couple of thoughts about how that all might be accomplished, but that's not a discussion that we should try to have today. But I did want to present the resolution. It's an advisory committee resolution, doesn't go to town meeting. It's just us saying that we think that this is important.
Yeah. I'm sure no one objects to that.
Okay, I'll take it down then.
Well, thank you, Carol and Mike and others for initiating that. I think we'll give everybody an opportunity to read over it, and that'll be a specific topic for the next meeting, I think.
Yep. Okay. Next is CIP, and we're running over our hour that's usually allocated to this meeting, which is not a problem, but
anything, Melissa, you want to report on that?
I think it was just a capital update on the school projects. That's usually what we do during this meeting. And I don't know, normally Susan Wolfdikoff has come in the past, and I don't know if Mariah or Suzanne, you have any information on any updates that the group would need.
Mariah, what do we know? We've heard that Driscoll is over by several million, 5 to 7 million, 5 million. The bids are high, and I know they're doing a lot of value engineering to get down the close, are they close, Mariah? Is that what she said?
Past, they're past it is what I understood. I'm
Oh, yeah,
gonna
she
try,
said-
I did
yeah.
not know this was an assignment. Now that I know, I'll be prepared for the future, but so what we heard at Capitol this week was that, right, the bids came in, I think 5.8 over the budget. They've done value engineering and value engineered, I think it was 7.2 out of the
Right.
budget. And they're going to go back out to bid, I believe, next month, and hopefully having exceeded the value and the required amount, they will come in below budget. And if possible, add some things back in. They've identified some things that could be added back in, if that makes sense. And just one note is that the geothermal wells are definitely out as a result of this process. The building is still fossil fuel free, but the geothermal wells are out.
Right, what we heard from, I think it was Carla who reported, Carla Banker reported that the value engineering had been, the reworking had been done so that there was a potential $1.5 million cushion for going out to bid again.
Yeah, I think the 7.2 minus 5.8. So yeah, around $1.5 million.
Yeah.
Interesting. Any other reports regarding capital?
Well, Bernard,
Yes.
I could just talk briefly about the high school. Actually, I'll know more soon because we're still negotiating with the MBTA over especially the force account, which is the account that we use to pay them for the flag people and the diversions that we need. And they still haven't given us a definitive answer about the diversions. But the good news is that we've now removed the platforms. So when now the trains just have to go by because nobody can step off the train into a black hole. And the trains will be bypassed for at least through August or hopefully October. We've made it clear to the MBTA that our work on on Skanska's work on the 22 Tappan will be over by November. And so if we're not done because they haven't given us the diversions we need, guess they'll have to finish the station. That's our position. It's kind of tricky, but we're holding to it right now. And it has budget implications. But I think given, when we got the extra 31 million essentially, because the DOR knocked off some from the 32.2 the town meeting approved. But I think we're going to be fine. The question, I guess, is some of the deferred maintenance that Charlie talked to us about after the project scope was already done is still kind of hanging out there. So, if we have any surplus, we could use, potentially could use it for that. And there are some other potential uses as well. I don't know. But the project right now is fine. We just have to make sure the MBTA doesn't try to jack up the force account costs.
They would never do that.
Right. I always said, it's no way to run a railroad.
Okay, anything else?
I just want to say one last thing. It's not a capital project yet, but as you know, we acquired Newbury College. And by the way, we just financed that and we have possession of that. And we have committed to a multi-year planning process for the long range use of that property, including everything under the sun: recreation, open space, school classrooms, needs, affordable housing, and so on. And you may be aware that there is a resolution proposal at the town meeting that seeks to reserve the use of that property for affordable housing. So I know the select board heard that, and I think that we all have an interest in the Newbury property. So I just want to mention that. That's it.
Okay, so do we want to set a date for another meeting? And at that meeting, we'll talk about the advisory committee resolution, among other things. What makes sense? I mean, quickly or?
I'd rather not do it for 2 weeks to give us enough time to put some numbers, at least 2 weeks, but after that, I don't know,
Okay.
Melissa, you're going to be doing a lot of the work along with Justin and others. What do you think?
2 weeks is the combined reports deadline, so I'm a little concerned about that. First week in May might be better.
After Tuesday.
About Thursday?
Vote, yeah. Yeah, Thursday, the 6th, May 6th.
Okay with me. What time?
Same time? Seems to work.
Thursday, May 6th at 1 p.m.?
Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
All right, we'll send something
Yeah.
out. Thank you very much for everybody's attention and input. I always say, and I said to my department heads, this is your whole career, you've been waiting to spend money on projects that are important to the town that you would never have the opportunity to. And I don't mean this like we're blowing the money. We have a lot of needs.
Yeah.
This is a really unique opportunity. None of us will ever have again. So I think we should, take it seriously and use it wisely.
We hope we'll never have it again.
Right.
We better not.
Well, we said that in 2008. Hope we wouldn't have a financial collapse again.
This federal aid is like nothing that we've ever seen before. This is very significant money out there, and we need to figure out how to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I mean, this is like 10 times what we've ever seen, literally.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.